Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah wa syukrillah. It is a pleasure and honor for me to be with all of you this evening. And just for the benefit of Cik Khairi, who is joining us for the first time, what we have been doing for a couple of years is that on the first Thursday of the month, we have this session that is focused on neurosemantics. The third Thursday of the month, we have a session on meta coaching.
Okay.
Yeah, and recently with the I would say with the situation that we're facing with COVID and us discovering Zoom, I've decided to add on the second Thursday and the fourth Thursday of the month. Hi, Franska, good to see you. Yeah, so nowadays, what we are doing is we are having the sessions every week. And Hashim, welcome. Alhamdulillah, you are under bright light. For a photographer, you are overexposed.
I'm exposed, but hopefully not to COVID. It's good for COVID protection.
Alhamdulillah, so good to see all of you. And Franska, I've just made you co-host. I hope you don't mind. Thank you for helping me.
Okay.
Yeah, we are just getting started. Just mentioning to our new guest, Cik Khairi. For years, we've been having the Neuro Semantics Circle on the first Thursday of the month, and then the Meta Coaching Circle on the third Thursday of the month. And in December, I added in a session on parenting, and there are quite a number of people interested. So I've decided now to have our Thursday sessions every week. Every week, the first Thursday is focused on neurosemantics, as what we've been doing. The second Thursday will be focusing on communication and relationship. That will be the focus for the second Thursday. The third Thursday will we maintain it as meta coaching, and the fourth Thursday will be focused on parenting. Because we've got quite a good request from there, so we'll maintain that. So what I have done for this session, inviting all of you for this session on the topic of NLP and neurosemantics. Over, I think, close to 2 years, Franska, we've been having the neurosemantics, the meta coaching 3 years already.
Yeah.
We've been going deep. We've been going deep into the specifics of neurosemantics, the patterns in neurosemantics. So if I were to use the analogy of a whale, so now we are coming up to the surface. Like the whale needs to breathe. Okay, so coming up to the surface, just having this topic on NLP and neurosemantics, and with the intention that should there be people who have not encountered this before, and especially, and also for people who have been through this, to have an overview of what NLP and what neurosemantics, because the tendency for us is we use our difference meta program to say, oh, this is NLP, this is neurosemantic, NLP is better, neurosemantic is better, that kind of thing. So we want to get rid of that fog to know that one is being strengthened by the other. Both are, I would say, within the same discipline. So it is not about one or the other, it's about how one strengthens the other. So that is what we have here, neurosemantics and NLP. Now, the reasons why people want to learn about neurosemantics and NLP are various benefits. I've listed quite a few over here. So I'm just going to go through each one of them very quickly. And I'd like to invite you just to have a sense of what these benefits and how they may have impacted you in certain ways. So let's take a look quickly. When we talk about NLP, what are the benefits? Why should I learn NLP? What advantages does it bring to me? Okay, first one here is create and maintain rapport in your relationships. Learn the most effective communication skills. Understand yourself and others better. Learn the strategies to model others' excellence in any area of life. Enjoy more choice in your handling of any situation. Build more rewarding relationships. Increase your confidence for networking, team working, management, and all relationships in general. Positively influence others. Know how to get more fun out of life through your relationship with yourself and others. Discover the personal state that allows you to act with confidence and integrity. Frankly speaking, had I not yet known about NLP, had I not been introduced to NLP, and somebody comes to me and say, look, you need to learn NLP because it gives you these benefits, and list down all of those things to me, what I've just said out to you, I would probably run away. You know, because they are out there, people who promise you, you know, you take this pill, you can get everything. I would probably do that because the skeptic inside of me will say, how come one thing can give all of those benefits? And I'm just grateful that when I was first introduced to NLP, I had only one thing in mind, because I was introduced to NLP when I was attending a conference in Wellington sometime around 2000. And there was this lady on stage, and she had this really powerful presence, uh, making her presentation. And in that presentation, she mentioned about NLP. And what struck me at that time, wow, NLP can help her to become such a powerful presenter. So I think I want to learn that. So luckily, what attracted me to NLP was one thing. Had she mentioned all of those, I would say, no lah, it cannot be. It's just that she was in Australia. She was operating from Australia, and I set intention that I would like to learn from her. Her name's Philippa Bond. Nothing to do with James. No relationship with James. Uh, it's just that, okay, she was in Australia, so I need to get my money ready in order to go there. So I started learning, and as I started learning, I realized, oh, there's a lot more to NLP than just being a better trainer. And along the way, I realized, yes, all of the things that I mentioned earlier now made sense. Yeah? And to a large extent, that's the difficulty that we have when people ask us, what is NLP? And as Michael puts it, if you meet an helper who keeps on talking about NLP, how great it is, there is one question that you can ask to shut that person up. If he's talking so much about NLP, there's one question you ask. You ask him, what is NLP? And he will shut up because it is too wide to give a very concise answer. So that's the difficulty. So what I'm doing tonight, I'm biting off a huge thing just to, in this short time, to talk to you about NLP and neurosemantics because it's a very wide field. Just recently, somebody commented to me about NLP on LinkedIn, and I said to him that I've been learning and applying this for over 12 years now, and I feel as if I am just getting started. And when I said that, it was from a realization that, yes, there is so much, and I wasn't exaggerating because there is so much more to dig in. So, what is NLP anyway? First and foremost, this is the first thing that I came across regarding NLP. It's just that it is so simple an answer that it just went beyond me. NLP is a communication model. It's just, I'll use the word just, it's just a communication model. That's all. Just allowing it to sink in for a moment. Because that one went right past me. How could that explanation cover what NLP is? Because there is so much in it. Now, when we say it is a communication model, we are referring to this model. NLP gives us this structure about how we human beings operate and function, how we map and model the information that's outside there, how we structure resourcefulness, and how we structure excellence. And that is a lot. That is a lot. And as we go in deeper into NLP, another statement that went past me initially, it had to be mentioned to me over and over and over again until it hit my forehead is communication is relationship. It's one and the same thing. We just use two different words to describe it. So if NLP is a communication model and communication is relationship, then what we have is that NLP is about human communicating and relating. So at any point in time when human beings are connecting and relating and communicating with one another, then the NLP structure is relevant. And no wonder that when you understand and apply NLP in your life, you'll get all of those benefits when you master them. Now, at the core of NLP is about being infinitely flexible in our responses to the multitude of stimuli that we face on a daily basis. We have so many people around us, so many things that are happening around us. So what NLP gives to us is the ability to respond to the different stimuli in the best possible way, and to be able to make changes to our responses to achieve the results that we want. Because if we are not aware about stimulus and response, we tend to respond according to our automatic responses. And many people, things happen, they respond automatically. Something else happen, they respond automatically in the same way. And that's why it drives them crazy. So in order not to drive ourselves crazy, NLP teaches us to monitor, to observe, notice the stimulus and respond accordingly, according to the nuances that we observe about those stimulus. So that's how NLP gives us that greater amount of, I would say, flexibility in our responses. Okay. So what I have prepared for this evening is, instead of going on into the I would say, the marketing of NLP. So this is not about that. I'm going to approach NLP from the models. What are the models used in NLP, and also the models used in neurosemantics, so that you can have greater distinction to that. So before we go into the models, I'd like to open up for any questions or discussions for the time being with respect to that brief description or definition of what NLP is. So please just unmute your mic and then let me hear what you have to say. Go ahead.
Mazuki.
Yes.
Actually, I've thought a lot about this NLP, and yeah, it was mentioned as a communication model. I do agree with that. But somehow or other, my brain, my mind, it keeps on telling me it's basically, if I learn NLP, it's my understanding of the language that you use to program your mind. And once I understand the language that you use to program your mind, there are a lot of benefits that come with it for me. That's how I see it.
Yeah.
Is that I know it's a communication model, which is correct, but it's just the way I'm looking at it.
Yeah. Yeah. I absolutely agree with you, because when we look at the models that I'm going to cover in a short while, when we talk about communication model, there is that intrapersonal communication. So that's what you are referring to, Dr. Amin, just now. So that's part of NLP, how we communicate to ourselves. And then understanding how we communicate to ourselves, you put it out into the world. That's also how we communicate to others and how they communicate to themselves. So once we understand the exquisite distinctions, how communication occurs, we are now in full control of our own internal communication and in control of how we need to communicate to others, so that they will communicate to themselves in ways that are more resourceful. So yes, there is no disagreement about that. Thank you.
Thanks, Mazuki.
Thank you. Yes, Khairi?
Yeah, I tend out to like the way you put in a nutshell that NLP is communication model, because I've been also talking a lot about NLP to people. I tend to break it down into neuro-linguistic programming. Neuro is something about the brain system, linguistics using words, and programming is how you use those words for your internalization and also for establishing rapport, establishing a relationship with people. So it's, I think in a nutshell, it's a communication model, which is a good phrase to use. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So I'm not the author of those of that phrase. I take it from others as well, from Michael Hall, from Bandler and Grinder, basically. Hi, Marilyn. Good to see you. You're not swimming tonight. Right. So in order for us to have the, I would say, exquisite distinction between NLP and neurosemantics, before I continue on, neurosemantics is based upon NLP. So it is not something new. People, I don't know, there might be people who, for the purposes of marketing or what, may want to create a distinction from that. However, we want to acknowledge the work of the giants who come before us. So NLP is based, neurosemantics is based upon NLP. So what are the models used in NLP? So for those models, let me just show you very briefly in order to help you have a better appreciation of it. So let me just, oops, where is that? Keynote, okay, that's the one. Share, yes. Okay. So altogether, I counted, and there might be more. However, what I counted, there are 8 models used in NLP. One is the meta model. Next is the representational system model. The third one is the I accessing cue model. The fourth is the Milton model. The fifth one is the strategy model, the TOTE model. Then the sixth one is the meta programs model. The seventh one is sub-modality model. And the eighth is timelines model. So altogether, I counted 8 models used in NLP. So let's very quickly go through each one. I think we'll just cover, say, 2 of the models, and we'll have a quick discussion about them. So let's take the first one, the meta model. The meta model is the structure of language with a set of linguistic distinctions and questions. So the meta model gives us the structure, the internal structure of language, and from that structure, it allows us questions that we can ask in order to get into specificity. So the value of learning the meta model is that it gives me questions that I can ask in order to get precise understanding of what the person means. So that's the first one, the meta model. The second one is the representational system model. The representational system, here we are referring to when we look at the world out there, the territory, we are reproducing and representing what we have seen, heard, felt, smelled, and tasted. We represented all of those onto the inner screen of our mind. So we represent what we have experienced. Now, understanding this model, the representational system model, allows us to understand better and closer about how another person experiences the world. So, first 2 models, the meta model of language and the representational system model. Okay, so I'll just pause there. Any questions or comments? The first 2 models, meta model and the representational system model. Okay, so let's move to the next one. The third model is the I accessing cue model. And most of you, if not all, you have learned NLP practitioner. I would like, as we go through this point, I would like you to mentally click whether you remember or you learn this or not. Franska and Marilyn, if you don't remember it, then it is my fault. Okay. So the third model is the eye accessing cue model. Now, the movement of the eyes in a patterned way gives some indication about what the person is doing inside their mind as he or she is processing the information. So while they are processing information, it gives us a clue about what they are doing inside. So with the eye accessing cue model, it gives us a way to make sense about what's happening in a person's mind. Okay? So that's the eye accessing cue model. The fourth one is the Milton model. Using the structure of language, the first one earlier was the meta model. Using that same structure, the meta model of language, now we are inviting the person to move up into trance. Whereas the meta model, we are bringing them down into specificity. Now we are using the meta model in the reverse direction. Milton model is in the reverse direction, going up to get the person to go inside their mind. Now, where do we use this? For building and maintaining rapport, for influencing, and for general agreement with a person. So that's the Milton model. So let me again pause here. Any questions or comments with respect to the I accessing Q model and the Milton model? Marilyn and Franska, ingat If you don't ingat, then you say, Mazuki, you did not teach me. Okay, so let's move to another two. Let's take another two here. Next model is the strategy model, the TOTE model. Now, the TOTE model is so important over here because it is by using the strategy model that Bandler and Grinder modeled Virginia Satir, Milton Erickson, and also Fritz Perls, and ended up with NLP. So the strategy model, a strategy refers to a series of representational steps. We take the representational steps that moves from the original stimulus to some final response. You have a stimulus and there is an internal strategy that we run that creates that final response. So the TOTE model allows us to locate, to identify what's that internal representational steps the person is making in order to respond in a certain way under a specific stimulus. So with this model, it allows us to learn and replicate the structure of excellence. Yeah. So if somebody has learned to do something excellently using the TOTE model, we are able to detect that person's internal strategy in order to be able to perform in that particular way. Okay, so that's the strategy model, the TOTE model. The sixth one is the meta programs model. Yeah. The meta programs model refers to the thinking patterns and perceptual filters that govern our thinking, our emotions, our skills, and our sense of reality. Altogether, we have 60 meta programs. Franska, you remember all of them? Okay. Now, with the meta programs model, it allows us to better understand people's behaviors. Okay. So that's the meta programs model. So let me pause there again. Any questions or comments would you like to make regarding the strategy model and the meta programs model? Okay. Are you good? Thank you. Azila, at any time you'd like to ask question, you can ask immediately, okay? Just and welcome, Didri. Good to see you here. So let's move to the next two. Next, we have the sub-modalities model. So the sub-modalities model refers to the distinctions of sensory representations. We talk about the visual, auditory, kinesthetic, olfactory, and gustatory representational systems. The sub-modalities goes into further distinctions of each of those modalities. Now, understanding the sub-modalities model allows us to have a more detailed description of a person's map so that we can better appreciate and understanding what it is that they are experiencing based upon the world that they are faced with. Okay, and the last model, the 8th model here, is the timelines model. From the timelines model, we know about the encoding of time zones and also time experience of a person. Now, the benefit, the value of using the timelines is that it allows us to facilitate hurt, pain, or trauma of past experiences in order that we can be more resourceful in the present. So that's the value of the timelines model. So 8 models altogether from that we learned from NLP. So that's why whenever people come into the NLP practitioner program, I say the material that you have with you, even though the training program is only 9 days, the material that you have with you is good for another 5 years, because from each of these models there is so much things to learn. So that's why it was only recently that I said to someone, I said, I feel like I'm just beginning. There is so much there. So any comments or questions that you would like to make with respect to the NLP model? 8 models altogether. And not just the 8 models, because from the 8 models, Bandler and Grinder, from their, I would say, intelligence and genius that they possess, they came up with more than 100 patterns, 100 strategies to handle specific situations. So apart from these 8 models, there are more than 100 patterns. So if you have, what's the book again? Structure of Magic. Yes, can't remember the Handbook of Magic. Yeah, so you have that book. It is an encyclopedia of all the NLP patterns and also the neurosemantics pattern. So questions and comments with respect to the NLP models. Jessica's coming in. So are you good with that? Thank you. Right, so let's move to the next one. Hi, Jessica. Good to see that you are joining us.
I almost forgot.
More than halfway through already. So you've missed the secret of life, right, guys? So don't tell her what's the secret of life. We just discussed that.
Okay, I know, because it is secret, so you cannot tell me. It's all okay.
Thank you. So let's move to the neurosemantics model. Now, this is where I got a little stunned as well, as I'm doing research for these evening sessions. Neurosemantics, the contribution of neurosemantics to NLP is the primary model that is the meta-states model. In 1994, Michael introduced the meta-states model as he was trying to model resilience. So as he was modeling resilience, he discovered this meta-states model and brought it to the attention of the NLP community of the world. And for that, he was acknowledged for his contribution. However, from the meta-states model, what was discovered from the meta-states model, 11 other models. So the neurosemantics model brings in 12 models to NLP. The first one is the meta-states model. Then I would say additions and contributions to the meta-programs model, then to the timeline model, then the mind lines model. From the mind lines model as well, number 5 is the cinematic features model. This is an enhancement to the sub-modalities model. Then coming off directly from the meta states model, number 6 is the frame games model. And number 7, the matrix model. Number 8, the levels of culture model. And this is also new to me. So I'm not quite familiar with this model. Then number 9 is the benchmarking model. Number 10, the axis of change model. Number 11, the self-actualization quadrants model. And number 12 is the performance analysis model. 12 models altogether. And model number 12 is also something that is quite new to me as well. So let's take these models one by one, shall we? So the first one, the meta-states model. It is a model that maps out the workings of our self-reflexive consciousness, our thinking, feeling about our thinking, feeling, and continuing on and on and on, the recursive thinking, feeling. This is the kind of consciousness that enables us to step back from ourselves and to reflect upon our experience of our thinking, feeling. Not just reflecting on the event, we are reflecting on our thinking, feeling process. Via the meta-stating process, we create states about states, thinking and feeling frames about our experiences. And so we create layers of embedded frames of meaning to create our matrix of frames. So that's the meta states model. The next one is the meta programs model. Yes, the meta programs model came directly from NLP. Now, while the meta programs were discovered and collected as a collection of perceptual filters governing consciousness, there was no systematic model that organized them until the model in the spirit of NLP and later out figuring out people occurred. So prior to the meta states model, it was just a collection of perceptual filters. Now, the meta states model gives us a way of categorizing the filters in terms of cognition, emotion, conation, and semantic. The meta programs model explains how meta programs arise from meta states. Meta programs are solidified meta states. So let me pause there. Any questions or comments? Hey, Marilyn upside down. Any questions or comments? So you are familiar with meta programs and also the meta states model, right? So when we talk about meta NLP, the NLP certification program from Neuro Semantics, so that certification program has been outframed using meta states model. So that's why when you attend the meta NLP program, and if you were to compare with NLP certification program, you'll notice the difference. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Amin. You need to step out at 9. Thank you for letting me know. So, shall we move on? Let's take on another 2 models from Neuro Semantics. The next model is the timeline model. The timeline model, when Richard Bandler created the idea of timelines, there was no model of the levels of time until meta-states remodeled it in Adventures in Timelines. So as a model for with the levels of time, distinctions could be made between at least 16 kinds or 16 dimensions of time. So what basically neurosemantics contributed to the original timelines was the distinctions of the levels of time. Now, number 4, next one is the timelines model. The timelines model is a model that maps out the 7 directions that we can frame and reframe. And so send a brain that invites the construction of new meanings. We have a meaning which is unresourceful. With the with the mind lines model, we can send the brain into 7 different directions so that they can discover new meanings that are more resourceful. So as a model for conversational reframing, mind lines simplifies the directions of consciousness and the art of constructing additional perspectives for changing our responses to the world. So that's the timelines model and also the timelines model and also the mind lines model. So questions. So are you already getting confused? Timeline, mind line, different line? Yeah. So mind lines in meta NLP, that is where we cover on reframing. Yeah. Reframing, basically that's the beginning of the I would say the introduction to the mind lines model. So in reframing, we have 7 different directions, 23 different distinctions of reframing. So that's the mind lines. Okay, so questions or comments? Are you still with me? Right, thank you. So let's move to another 2. Let's take another 2 models. Next model is the cinematic features model. The cinematic features is an enhancement of the sub-modalities model. We also have designated this the meta modalities model. So that's why when you attend the meta NLP program, I gave a mention that in neurosemantics, we call sub-modalities as meta modalities. This remodels the whole NLP domain of sub-modalities. Now, for many people, this discovery was shocking and stunning because there is no such thing as sub in modalities. You cannot have a visual without whether it is near or far, without it is clear or blur. When you say visual, those cinematic features are already there. In order to notice those features, you need to step back. The moment you step back, you are going meta. So that's why we call it meta modalities. So these editorial features involve stepping back from our movies and editing them from a higher level. So now you are the movie editor, using various cinematic distinctions that has previously been called sub-modalities. So that's the cinematic features model. The next model is the frame games model. So the frame games model is, according to Michael, a more user-friendly version of meta states that we speak about the 2 dimensions of levels of our games. 2 levels or dimension. We talk about the inner game of frames and the outer game of behavior. So that's the frame game, when we have the inner game right, then we'll play the outer game right. So frame games analysis involves detection, acceptance, and transformation. From this model, we now have numerous key books and training manuals. This framing model tracks the way we use our brain and nervous system to bring the experience we have into in the world into ourselves, and we use them as references, frames of references, frames of meaning, and the frameworks for our personality. So that's the frame game model. So that's why in meta coaching, in order to coach a person in their behaving, we go into their frames, because once the frames are right, then the game is right. Winning the inner game in order to win the outer game. So you have probably heard me say that many times. So that is when that is basically referring to the frame games model. Okay, so let me pause there. Any questions or comments? Okay, good. Next, let's move. Oh, we've got another 6 more. Let's move. From the frame games model comes the matrix model. So the matrix model comes from the frame games model. So the matrix model is a model that unifies all of the models of NLP and neurosemantics into 3 process matrices of meaning, intention, and state, and 5 content matrices of self, power, others, time, and the world. Okay. 3 process matrices. The first one is the grounding matrix of state. Then we have meaning and intention. Then the content matrix of self, power, others, time, and the world. The process matrices make up the cognitive behavioral aspect of the model, what is commonly referred to as cognitive and behavioral psychologies. And the content matrices make up the developmental aspect that is from the developmental strategy. So the matrix model is your favorite, huh, Franska? Sorry, Jessica. Okay, questions or comments?
One question.
Yes.
The cinematic, is it the one that we have been experienced before when we are in the class, the cockroach? Is it that one? We play yes. the movie, and then we become like the director at the back, and then we delete, roll back, roll forward, roll back, roll forward.
Not so much that will fall under the category of frame games.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's the fast phobia cure or the movie rewind pattern. You remember your cockroach very well, huh? You must.
Oh,
love
I
your
remember.
cockroach.
That is why the flying cockroach.
Let me ask this then.
Yes.
Cinematic features, is that the same as in the dissociative state?
Yes, part of that. So in NLP, it is called the sub-modality. So the sub-modality of being in an experience, whether it is associated or disassociated. It's just that in neurosemantics, we prefer not to use the word associated or disassociated. We prefer to use, are you seeing it through your own eyes or are you seeing yourself inside there?
Same meaning.
Yeah. The only reason is that because psychiatrists use the term dissociated as a psychiatric condition.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So we decided, okay, let's not use that because to psychiatrists, dissociated, oh, there's something wrong with you.
Okay, got it, got it.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So thank you, Azila, for being here. You need to step out as well. So let's move to the next 2 points, which is number 8, the levels of culture. Number 8, the levels of culture model. Using metastates and John Searle's formula for the construction of social reality, the levels of culture model provides a way to map how group mind arises and the development of social reality from the meaning making of individuals. So this has led to cultural modeling courses and various applications. So to some extent, when we are talking about facilitating the mass consciousness of a certain society or culture, so this is the model that we use in order to understand the cultural model of a certain society or culture. Okay, so that's the levels of culture model. Then number 9 is the benchmarking model. So especially for meta coaches in this room, the word benchmarking strikes fear right to the heart. Okay, the benchmarking model. It is a model that uses the denominalization process of the meta model to operationalize terms that are abstract and that refer to intangible evaluations, values, and skills. Using drilling down questions, the benchmarking model offers a specific way to create KPIs, key performance indicators. So the benchmarking models gives us an exquisite way of, when we talk about a certain performance, to bring the description of the performance into the see, hear, feel language. Because when you bring it into the see, hear, feel language, only then you can benchmark the behavior. And from the perspective of person involved in performance management of organizations, this is where a lot of organizations fail their staff when it comes to KPIs, because when it comes to the personal performance, we are not referring to the business performance, the personal performance in terms of the character of the individuals, the descriptors are nominalizations to the extent that it's difficult to measure the behaviors. So using the benchmarking model, we are able to bring categories of behaviors into specific see, hear, feel behaviors. So that's where the benchmarking model comes in. And number 10, okay, number 9 is the benchmarking model, and number 10 is the axis of change model. So Dr. Anwar, you need to pay particular attention to this one. In meta coaching, the axis of change model, a model that maps out how healthy, self-actualizing people change through the change stages of motivation, decision, creation, and solidification. The axis of change handles the levels and dimensions of change based on Bateson's work and meta states, and describes the axis of leadership and sales as well. So that's the axis of change running through 4 specific meta programs that relates to motivation, decision, creation, and solidification. So let's pause there. Any questions? So taking the benchmarking and the axis of change model, that strikes fear to people learning meta coaching. Yeah, Dr. Anwar?
Actually, I'm just reading about it. Last night, I started reading about Excel change in detail.
Yep, go ahead and read in more detail. You are going to need it. Yeah. And just to give a mention that the benchmarking model and the axis of change model were co-created and co-developed by Michael Hall and Michel Duval. Yeah. Okay. So moving on to the final 2 models in neurosemantics. The self-actualization quadrant model, also known as the neurosemantic meaning performance axis. So now you remember, meaning performance model. A model that uses the meta programs of self-actualization to identify the heart and soul of how self-actualization occurs as the synthesis of the meta program continua poles along the axis of meaning and performance. The neurosemantic self-actualization model includes the self-actualization quadrants, which enables us to diagnose the relationship between meaning and performance, and to use the quadrants to recognize that we all perform meaning and hence experience neurosemantic states. The only difference is whether our meaning are high enough and our performance are best enough. Okay. Then the final model is the performance analysis model. And this is also something new to me. A model that maps out with 12 questions, a performance analysis to identify the stages and the levels of performance, and then enables one to profile the leverage points for the greatest transformation and empowerment. So this is a model that we use in order to analyze a person's performance. Okay, so we've covered 12 additional models that neurosemantics enriches NLP with. So questions and comments.
Yes, Marzuki. You started by saying NLP, neurosemantic is evolves or part of the NLP, is an offshoot of NLP. And you began by saying that NLP is a communication model and relationship more or less model, right? Now it's becoming more complex to me as you break down it into 12 models. Would it still fall under the communication and relationship model?
How I see it, thank you for that comment. How I see it is that, for example, let's just take one of it, the matrix model. The matrix model is looking into, let's say, the content matrix of self, power, others, time, and the world. So at any time, I am operating within any one or couple of those matrices. So how I see it is that when I am connecting and relating with a person, that's where it is most important for me to use the skill of rapport so that I can bring the person into the matrix that I want to have the discussion in. So it still goes back to that one. And maybe those of you who attended my class are familiar. At least I know Franska, Marilyn, and Jessica, you are familiar with this example. This example came from my eldest granddaughter. Her name's Azahra. However, I call her Grasshopper. Now, uh, uh, at one time, she's the kind of girl that when she wakes up in the morning, she doesn't want to go to sleep. She just, until when it is late at night, then she has to, then she'll go to sleep, because sleeping is a waste of time for her. So she wants to do something all the time. So one day, my wife, her Nemi, notices that she appears, the outward is showing that she's sleepy, and she wouldn't admit it. Yeah, the outward appearances, she appears sleepy. So Nemi asked her, so out of the blue, Nemi comes to her and say, Zahra, are you sleepy? And she looked at Nemi and said, no, I'm not sleepy. I'm Snow White. So she was not in the matrix of self. She's in her fantasy la la land. So coming from two different matrices, that's when they could not get into an understanding. So it boils back down to communicating. And for me, understanding all of these models allows me to better understand others.
Okay, good example. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So those are the 12 models from neurosemantics, and not just the 12 models. Neurosemantics contributes another more than 150 patterns to NLP. So those of you who attended the Meta NLP program, I believe you might still remember me saying the word, okay, this is how I give you a description of how we do it in traditional NLP. However, I'm going to show you how the meta states model handle this situation. So things like even in timelines, we go into immediate meta stating rather than handling the sub modalities in order to handle hurt or trauma, right? Okay, so that's basically to be able to give ourselves a better appreciation, the differences between NLP and neurosemantics in terms of the models used. Yeah. However, I just want to stress here, neurosemantics is not something new. It is not something totally divorced from NLP. Do not get into the trap that just because you learn something more than what was previously is not relevant anymore. Michael keeps mentioning that we are standing on the shoulders of giants, not giants. And without the work of Bandler and Grinder coming up with the structure of magic of NLP, there will be no neurosemantics, because neurosemantics is built upon that. It's just that we are grateful that with the meta-states model, we have more and more distinctions, more and more models that allows us to connect and relate with people in ways that are more resourceful and easier to a large extent. When I say easier to a large extent, is about when we talk about resilience. Resilience, people talk about how to get into the state of resilience when you encounter setback. Yes, there are steps and stages for you to do it and get into that. It's just that with the meta states model, understanding resilience, we are able to meta state ourselves to the extent that we can bring ourselves to the state of super resilience. Super resilience, we are referring to that when a setback occurs, we do not experience trauma. Yeah? As opposed to the normal resilience process, when a setback occurs, we experience trauma, we learn to handle that trauma, we learn to get back on our feet and master that. So those are the stages. Now with the meta states model, what we do is we can meta state ourselves in the here and now, so that in the future, when a setback occurs, it doesn't puts us into that traumatic experience. We experience that setback, and yet we are not traumatized by that. So that's the value when we learn to metastate ourselves to learn to bring the metastating process as part of our meta program. Yeah. So question, Jessica put that benchmarking model. How can we learn? I thought you bought the book already on benchmarking. Just kidding. Yes, in Meta Masters, we go in detail about benchmarking. Because in Meta Masters, for the benefit of Encik Khairi, we call it Meta Masters. It's the Master Practitioner Program. In the Meta Masters program, we spend 3 days on modeling. So when we model, we go deep into benchmarking a person's behavior. So you will meet the benchmarking model in Meta Masters, and also in ACMC, the Associate Certified Meta Coaching Training Program, Coaching Mastery. Dr. Anwar, you'll not only be benchmarked using the benchmarks that has been created on the 7 core skills of coaching. There will be also an exercise whereby you take up a certain behavior and benchmark that behavior. So in that way, you are learning about the benchmarking model hands-on. Yeah. So in ACMC, we cover the benchmarking model. Too far. Too far, not in terms of distance, too far in terms of time. Because just now, before we started, Dr. Anwar is supposed to go for ACMC in April. Now April appears to be too far. I don't think anybody can travel yet in April. Okay, so there was a question. There was a question that came through my email. He signed up for the program, and I guess he's not able to come in. However, Mr. Iman Razali asked me a couple of questions. So I'm just going to bring the question here. The first question he asked was, how NLP can help me manage staff, especially young generation? Yeah. So for this one, sometimes I feel, please stop generalizing people. The reason why we get into problems about interacting, connecting with people when we bring in generalizations, treating people as if they're statistics, and that's what gets us into problem when relating and managing people. So how I answered to him was that, firstly, there is no difference between the older generation and the younger generation. Yeah, the difference is in age lah. One is older, the other is younger. But in terms of the aspects of human nature and needs no difference. Our nature is similar and our needs, our drives are similar. What differs is in the values, the priorities, and the psychologics of the individual human being. Yeah. The values and priorities may be influenced by social surrounding, so that may create a difference between the values of the older generation and the younger generation. However, it still boils down to values and priorities. Then at the individual level, human level, the psychologics are different. So what is needed is to have the knowledge of the nature of human nature and the skill of understanding individual human beings. So this is where the skill of communicating and relating plays a role. So to step back, move away from categorization of baby boomer, Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, millennials, and whatever, to step back, move away from those categorization and to begin looking at the individual in terms of their psychologics, in terms of their meta programs, and in terms of their levels of needs. Because when we talk about the hierarchy of needs, people's current needs will, to a certain extent, are driven by what stage that they are in. Yeah? Michael used the observation that I've not come across a person who is actualizing who is below the age of 50. So if you are dealing with somebody like, I'm looking at the young faces here, Marilyn, Deidre, Jessica, Franska. Okay, Dr. Anwar. Hashim and Mazuki cannot claim. Huh? Because of the stage of life that you are in, then for you, the priority of, I don't know, self-esteem, or the priority of, yeah, probably self-esteem, the priority of love and belonging would be greater, would be stronger. And there is nothing wrong about that. It's just the stages that people are in. So when we understand about the hierarchy of needs, just because you are not there at the self-actualization need means that you are a nobody. No, it depends on the stages of life. Just chill. Just chill. And that's why I typically say that to force a person to operate at a stage level higher than where they are at is as kind as expecting a blind man to see. Yeah. So if a person in their early 20s goes to work purely for the money, you don't need to say the person is immature, because what's driving that person is the matrix of power. What's driving the person is self-sustenance. So for that person, that is the right level to be in. That's all. Okay. So that's the first question. The second question, can NLP skill be used during negotiation? Can, Jessica? So do you remember the pattern? I asked pattern, now you scared already, yeah? So I answered to him, yes, there is a specific strategy for negotiation that NLP has detected. How many steps? Is it 1? Is it 2? Is it 3? Is it 4? Is it 5? Da-da-da. Come on. Remember or not? Ayo. You don't remember? I sweat already lah. 3. It's just 3 steps or stages. First one is to operate from a clear vision of outcomes. Second one, to use dialogue to develop potential agreement frames. And the third stage is to develop tentative plans. So just a 3-stage process. However, to execute the stages successfully, you need additional skills. What are they? The skill of listening, the skill of supporting, the skill of questioning, the skill of meta-questioning, the skill of perceptual positions, and the skill of inducing states. So when you have those skills, to execute the steps becomes easier. Not to say it's going to be easy, because it depends on the type of negotiation. If you are negotiating somebody who's operating from the win-win paradigm, then it will be easier. If you are negotiating with someone who's operating from the win-lose paradigm, then it's going to be more difficult. However, if you are negotiating with someone who's operating from lose-lose paradigm, run away lah. Okay, yeah. So I hope that gives some idea with respect to those questions. So any questions, any other questions coming from you guys this evening? Questions or comments that you would like to make? Yes, Marilyn. Yay!
Okay, so there's like, oh my gosh, so many models and hundreds of patterns, right? So what would you recommend for us for me to focus on if I want to say improve my relationship with myself and with others? Like, because there's so many to choose from. Like, yeah, I also bought many books, and then I start reading this a little bit, and then the other, and then and then Jessica tells me, oh, you must read the Matrix book. The Matrix book. Then I start reading the Matrix book. Then I'm like back to the Meta Programs book, and I'm like, there's so much information. Yeah. So where do we start, or what would you recommend that we can really zoom in on that would help, or that would help me?
What I would highly suggest to you is basically when you learn meta NLP, you are covering all of the models at a particular level. So that gives you an appreciation, awareness, and understanding of all of those models. Right? So I may not use the names of the models. However, what you have covered in Meta NLP and especially in APG gives you a strong foundation for that. And from there, you can choose whichever model to drill down deeper at any point, and let your interest drive you. Because all of those models are equally important. So to say this one is more important than the other, no. What happens that you have a good foundation already. So the foundation is broad. Now you can drill deep with that foundation, and you can take anyone. I don't know, Franska was mentioning that she's going through figuring out people. So that's the meta programs model. Just go ahead. If your interest is in there, just drill down as much as you can, so that the next time we meet, Franska, you give me all my 60 meta programs.
I'm still reading, not yet finished.
Good. Good.
Yeah, I started that as well, figuring out people, and then Jessica's like, "No, you must read the Matrix. It will it answer everything. It figure out everything about what's going on in people." So I was like, "Oh, okay."
It's my favorite. Sorry.
Yeah. She's like, "The answer is there in the Matrix."
Oh yeah, the Matrix is the answer.
Yes, figuring out people. Like Shiv has got that Yeah, because the matrix model is a model that unifies all of those. So from the matrix model, then we have a systemic understanding of where the other models are operating. Yeah, so that is the unification model. Now, in order to apply that fully and completely, it helps when you have greater understanding of the meta programs model, you have greater understanding of the meta states model and the frames games model. All of those are equally important. Just know that you have a strong enough broad base. So just drill deep according to your interest, because when you drill according to your interest, that gives you the momentum. Yeah. So I hope that is helpful, Marilyn.
Yes, thank you. So we won't say that one particular model is more useful than the other.
No. No.
Thank you.
Actually, one suggestion, Marilyn. Just pick one is the most easy you can learn and practice. That's how I started also. I just pick one, don't care. Can't figure out so many. I can't remember also. Just now Cikgu tested, sudah fail.
Yeah, that's the problem. So much information, right? And then everything seems like quite interesting to learn. And then, yeah, but you're right, Jessica. Thank you for that. Like, especially the word something that I can implement and actually use, not just know about. I think for me, that's yeah. Jessica knows me well.
Give yourself the permission to learn things according to your pace. You are not competing with people. In neurosemantics, we use the term apply to self first. So as I learn one specific thing, I apply on myself, because by applying it, it makes me understand that much more. And then I take another piece and then apply to myself. So that's the best way for learning. Yeah. Okay, so any other questions or comments?
Mas, can I say something?
Yes, go ahead, Ashim.
Yeah. When reading this, figuring out people, and listening to what you're mentioning today, basically these things we need to go step by step, one by one. Even in the book Figuring Out People, Michael said that many people try to do everything at once and they fail miserably. So he was saying in that book that do and master one by one. And I took time, even I have not finished even halfway through, because I noticed that certain things that in certain context, or I'm trying to use this this one. Like for example, I came across a context whereby, am I using my intuition or my heart sense?
Okay.
Because sometimes when I use so much intuition, I thought, oh, I already know this. And when I come back to the sensory, I go and investigate. I go and check. Then I realize, I did miss something. And I learned when Michael talked about that in the second, on the sensory and the intuitive thinking, oh, this is what it means. And it takes me some time to understand that. Great.
Right.
And secondly, what I learned from this settings is the ability for a human being to step back. And I noticed when I was younger, I'm still young at heart, but those days when I was young, my early 20s, 30s, I do not quite step back. I do quite step back. I fail to step back, and that's why I say to myself, know that, oh, that's the reason why I keep running in the peanut butter. Yeah. So when I started learning NLP and neurosemantics, I no more run in peanut butter.
Wow, thank you. Thank you, Hashim. Wow. Alhamdulillah. Yeah. Learn one at a time. If you are learning the figuring out people, learning meta programs, be aware of the whole 60 meta programs. We call it the meta program template, and then if you want to choose which sequence of meta program to learn, I have detected the sequence that Michael used to teach. So what I can do is I can give you that sequence. I hope it will help you in approaching the meta, because there are 60. So when Michael was teaching meta programs in Manila, I begin to sequence the meta program. First session, which meta program he teach first. Second session, which one? So I have that sequence. So what I can do is I can give you that sequence. Okay, I'll do that. Yeah, right. Thank you. Xiu Ang, good to have you here. We are almost wrapping up our session already. However, thank you for being here. Okay, any other questions or comments? So, yeah, yes, Hashim, I'll send it to all of you. Now, before we end, I would just like to invite each and every one of you, if you have any comments before we end. So, just checking. Deirdre, are you able to say, or do you have to keep quiet? Deirdre, anything? Thank you, Deirdre. Maybe she cannot be speaking. The children are sleeping. How about Xiu Ong? Anything that you would like to say before we end? I can't hear you. You are not muted, but there is no audio. Okay. So let me just move on to Jessica. Later on, if Xiu Ong, you have sorted that out, I'd like to hear from you, Jessica. Yes.
Nice to see you, Marilyn. Long time no see. Franska.
Yeah, you long time I never join class.
Yeah, good to
I
see
always
you
miss.
too.
I forgot.
Okay, I'll send you reminder. Right, Franska? We send each other reminder.
Because now it changed to Instagram, Telegram, and I actually never on it.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Jessica. Franska?
The session is good today because it helped me do the revision.
Okay.
And I realized that some of the names is very familiar, but I forgot what is the details. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Franska. And thank you, Xiu Ong. Your mic is faulty, so we can't hear you. Hope we can hear you the next time. And Hashim, anything from you before we end?
Thank you very much. I enjoyed and learned a lot, and quite overwhelmed by so much to actually to actually absorb. I'm trying to make my brain more elastic. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Hashim. Right. Marilyn?
I think I echo Franska's. It's always nice to revisit, especially I've been away from our sessions for almost a year, and yeah, makes me reminds me that there is so much to learn, but it's great to always be able to refresh. So thank you for having these sessions.
Right.
It's really great. And also reminds me that I need to go back and study a bit.
It reminds me I'm still at chapter 3.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, Marilyn. And Cik Khairi?
Yeah, thank you for this session. Actually, what attracted me to this session was the neuro-semantic part. I'm very familiar with the NLP, so tonight I learned there's a lot more to NLP than what I've learned. A lot more details. So it's quite interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. Alhamdulillah. And Dr. Anwar?
Okay. I just want to say about the books. A few of us were talking about books, which books and all that, right? Actually, when you ask Michael personally, he will tell you different answers to different people, depending on where you are, right? Because there was one guy, you know, Danny Mazuki in
Danny.
Surabaya.
Yeah.
Danny, he said, read figuring out people. Right? So I thought, okay, I'll read that. And then somebody else, he said, another book, Matrix. Read Matrix first. You must read that first. So he will tell you, depending on, he assess you where you are, and say, okay, read that book. You know, I think, you know, if you read that one book, everybody read that book, then, you know, you're progressing at different stages, at different levels, right, at different speed also. Yeah. So he will tell you, each of us ask him a book, he knows you, then you'll say, okay, read that book. You need that. And that's what I understood. And thank you for the session. Actually, you know, sometimes we hear and we always forget. And revision like this is good. They comes back together and we see how they fit in together. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. So everyone, thank you for being here. I really appreciate. I hope that what we've covered this evening useful for you. It has been useful for me in doing the research in order to have this session. All this while, when I think about neurosemantics, the model that I think of is the metastates model. It's just that the other models that we've been using, I did not honor them as models. We've been using the performance, the meaning performance model, the self-actualization quadrants. We've been using those, but not acknowledging that they are models on their own. So that's basically what's very helpful for me in researching for this particular for this topic this evening. So with that, everyone, thank you. I really appreciate your being here. I hope to be able to see you the next time. Next week, we'll be focusing on communication and relationship. So bringing one topic in that particular theme. So with that, good night. Have a good rest. Stay safe and see you next week, insyaAllah. So, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bye.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Bye.